All right, so here's the last part of 5.2, which again, this is due on Friday. So we talked about in class how bills go through committees. So the majority of committees in the House and the Senate are what we call standing committees. So a standing committee, as you can see up here, is permanent, right? They have, in order to be created or removed, that it takes an act of Congress or an act of the House or the Senate, depending on which we're talking about. So what will happen is a standing committee exists, and it is topic-based, subject-based, and they are going to proposed bills are going to go here first. So, for example, a bill about education would go to the Education Committee. A bill about dealing with another country would go to the Foreign Affairs Committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these committees are going to hold hearings on those bills, mark them up, pass them, or kill them. Most bills get killed in committee and never get out of committee. And they will also, and this is the really important thing for this class, is they will hold hearings on how laws have been implemented after they've been passed. So, for example, if the Education Committee, let's say there was a law that changed the number of minutes that students would have to be in schools, the Education Committee could have a hearing where the Department of Education comes and talks to them about how effective that law is. So this is what we call congressional oversight. Please, when you write that, hold hearings down, that line, circle it, star it, put a big, attract your attention to it somehow, because that is really important for things that we'll talk about later on in this semester, in this unit. Now, there are also joint committees. All you need to get down is what's highlighted on these slides, by the way. But joint committees are going to have both representatives from the House and senators from the Senate. The conference committee is the most important one, which is, like we talked about, its job is to reconcile the differences between the House version of a bill and the Senate version of a bill, to make the bill the same and uniform. Okay, but there are also other joint committees that deal with different subjects, but the conference committee is the most prominent one. This is a list of all the committees the standing committees in the House and the Senate. As you can see, there are a few more in the House than the Senate. They're mostly about the same things, right? There's a Judiciary Committee in each, a Budget Committee in each. But if you notice, for example, the House has one committee on education, has a committee on labor, well, small business, and the Senate has a committee where it combines most of those. So keep that in mind. There are some differences. Now, committee chairs are going to be the leader of a committee. They're always from the majority party. So whichever party has a majority in the House has the chair position in each of those committees in the House. Okay, and they have power. They influence the agenda, when votes happen, things like that. Some pros and cons of the committee system in Congress, right? Some pros is that it enables members of those committees to gain expertise on those specific policy areas. It makes it more manageable to work with pieces of legislation because there's less people working on them, right? If you had the whole House working on every piece of legislation, they would never get anything done. It's also too difficult for members of Congress to become experts on every single thing that the House does. So it's easier to kind of shrink that. And this also gives them a better way to have oversight over the implementation of these pieces of legislation. Now, some of the cons, the problems, is that it takes more time because each committee can drag their heels on everything. It's easier to lobby these members of Congress because they are in subject areas, right? So it's more efficient to lobby them. You don't have to lobby everybody. You just have to lobby about 24 people. And it's easier to make policies that benefit certain interests rather than the whole public, because you only have to influence, a majority of a committee rather than the whole Congress, at least to get things started. Now, don't write this slide down, but just as a reminder about budget and the power of the purse, right? We've talked about the budget before. Congress creates and passes a federal budget. There is two types of spending, discretionary and mandatory. Discretionary is authorized each year by Congress and can be changed during the budget process, right? Two of the biggest sections are defense and education. But if Congress wants to change education spending, they don't have to pass a new law. They just change it during the budget process. Whereas mandatory spending It does not have to be approved annually. It is by spending that has to happen by law. So in order to change it, you have to change it outside of the budget process. And this is 2/3 of the federal spending, right? It's all of our entitlement programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, as well as interest on national debt. Now, just a reminder about entitlement programs. Here's a large variety of them. The ones that you're going to have to know for sure are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But it also includes other welfare programs, SNAP or food stamps, as well as supplemental security. Okay. Fiscal policy, as a reminder, is done by, this is again review, so you don't have to write it down necessarily, but fiscal policy, as a reminder, is done by Congress and the president through legislation. And generally, it's going to be changes in tax rates, changes in government spending, and the budget process. Some terms that we talked about before that you will come up, right? A budget deficit is if our spending is greater than our tax revenue, right? So we're spending more than we're bringing in. Surplus is when we bring more in, our revenue is higher than our spending. And then a balanced budget is where it's equal. National debt is how much money the federal government owes in general. Okay. As a reminder that as entitlement costs have gone up, that means that the money that Congress has to allocate in the form of discretionary spending has decreased. And so there's more pressure to allocate that in a better way or to change how that is allocated. Okay. Now, two terms that you do have to know that don't really pertain as much to Congress anymore is pork barrel legislation and log rolling. Pork barrel legislation does not really exist as much anymore as it used to because of a lot of rules and pieces of legislation that have been passed. But basically what happens, pork barrel legislation is where you pass a bill and that bill will do something to give a certain amount of money to do something fairly specific in one specific district. Right, so maybe Mike Thompson gets a bill passed, and as part of that bill, it will create it will fund the construction of a bridge in Sonoma County. That's not necessarily something the federal government should do specifically, maybe if it was part of a larger program, but that being the one thing would bring money and jobs to just this district, and therefore would be considered pork barrel legislation. Log rolling is basically the idea that if you vote for the bill that I want to have passed, then I will vote for the bill that you want to have passed. Okay, it's trading votes. This happens all the time, though. Party polarization is something else we need to talk about when it comes to Congress. As a reminder, party polarization is the idea that the ideologies of the two parties and of people in general are moving further away from the middle and more towards the left and the right. Now, again, this is the division between Republicans and Democrats or liberals and conservatives. Okay. Some major causes here are going to be more of a focus on social issues and the major differences between the two ideologies and two parties when it comes to social issues, as well as the fact that during midterms and primaries, there are more kind of further left or further right voters than there are moderate voters. Now, the effects of this is that we have a lot of gridlock. We have a lot of policies that don't pass simply because it is difficult to pass them, right? Because there's not enough people who are willing to make compromises. It makes it so we have less bills passed. There are more filibusters and more threats of filibusters, as well as it makes it harder to confirm appointments because generally people are going to vote how their party wants them to. Okay. Now, a couple other terms that you need to know. Divided government. This is when the House, the Senate, and the presidency are not held by the same party, right? That would be more of a unified government. A divided government makes it harder to pass laws because if the House and the Senate are different parties, they have to come to a compromise to determine what actually gets passed, right? If the president is one party and the House and the Senate are majority the other party, that also makes it very difficult to pass legislation. Policy gridlock is the idea that creating policy and passing legislation gets slower and more difficult and therefore doesn't happen as much. Now, another College Board thing that you'll need to know are 4 models of congressional representation. I'm just going to put them all up on the screen. We have referenced these in the past, but just to kind of throw these out there, right? A trustee is a person who is going to vote how they believe is best, regardless of what their constituents want. As a reminder, a constituent is going to be a person that is being represented by that person in the government. A delegate is going to predominantly do what the constituents want them to do, regardless of what they think. A partisan is going to vote based on party, and then a politico is going to act as any of those three, depending on what the situation is. Right? In general, most politicians are politicos. They're going to change how they vote. Right? But the number of people who are partisan has increased over time. Now, last slide, and this is the most important slide, so please put a big box around this, draw some arrows to it. This is the most important thing about 5.1. What actions can Congress take? So there are 4 primary things that Congress can do. They can pass a law, which that is going to be creating legislation. They can also pass a resolution, which is a House resolution, meaning the House says this thing, the Senate says the thing, or both say the thing. And a resolution is just a statement by that group. A statement by the House, a statement by the Senate, a statement by Congress. So oftentimes House resolutions are like to honor somebody that has done something good, among a number of other things. Congressional investigation. This is when a committee or Congress on its whole is going to investigate something. And when they do this, they have subpoena power, so they can require people to testify under oath. So if you remember last year in U.S. history, learning about McCarthyism and kind of the Second Red Scare and HUAC, that the committee that kind of made people testify under oath, that's what this is, right? And then finally, oversight over the other branches. Because Congress passes legislation, they are going to have oversight, especially over the executive branch, because the executive branch enacts and enforces the law. Okay, so that is the end of 5.1. Remember, you also have the 5.2 ed puzzle and test corrections. All right, have a good day.